I invite you to listen to my new dramatic story about military honor, betrayal, and just retribution on the Purple Heart Stories channel. I'm sure it won't disappoint you. Please support with a like and subscription if you enjoy it. The last shot of honor. Chapter 1, Meeting with the Past. My life ended the moment that Iraqi shrapnel lodged 2 millimeters from my heart. Michael Hartman, a 48-year-old former Marine, received a 15-year stay of execution. A heart attack would have taken me sooner if not for Emily, the very woman who later sold me out to a Mexican drug lord and betrayed the country for which I had shed blood. Today, in a Cancun restaurant, fate brought me together with Thomas Bradley, the son of my fallen commander. And before the shrapnel finally completes its work, I need his help, not to save my life, to restore something much more important, my honor. Cancun greeted me with heat and humidity, like a stuffy interrogation room where you start sweating before the first question. I sat on the terrace of La Piera restaurant, looking at the ocean. Dr. Eisenstein gave me a month, maximum. I could feel the shrapnel slowly approaching its target with each heartbeat. 15 years of reprieve were coming to an end. The tequila warmed my throat but couldn't warm my soul. The sound of waves mixed with the chatter of tourists, young, carefree, unable to realize that each breath they took was a gift that people like me had once accepted on their behalf. That's when I saw him. Tall, with proper posture and an attentive gaze, he stood out among the tourists like a sniper among recruits. 25, maybe 26. He was studying the menu but felt my gaze upon him. Our eyes met, and I saw in them the shadow of the man who had saved my life 15 years ago. I raised my glass, inviting him with a gesture. He hesitated for a second, no more. Prepared, assessing risks, deciding quickly, commander's blood. "May I join you?" His voice was quiet but confident. "Of course, please." I pointed to the empty chair. "Robert Drake," I extended my hand. A handshake reveals everything. His was firm, confident, not the handshake of a lawyer or businessman. Such hands belong to people who know the value of every decision they make. "Alex Sullivan," he introduced himself. "I know," I allowed myself a slight smile. "You're the spitting image of your father, same eyes, same stubborn chin." He tensed, became wary, correct reaction, not trusting a stranger who knows too much about you. "You knew my father." I took a photograph from my breast pocket, worn around the edges. 3 sergeants and a captain, all in full gear, the dust of Fallujah on their boots, midday, the roof of a captured building. I pointed to the tall officer in the center. "More than just knew, we served together in Iraq. Your father saved my life during that mess in Fallujah, earned the Medal of Honor, posthumously." His fingers trembled slightly as he took the photograph. Recognition, pain, pride, all mixed in his eyes. I had seen this same photograph framed on the mantelpiece in the Sullivan home. James had shown it to me when I visited him a week before deployment. "I didn't expect to meet you here," I continued, "but I suppose fate works in strange ways." He returned the photograph to me like a sacred relic. "Has life been good to you, son? Got a girlfriend?" "No, just focusing on studies. College, parties, lectures, nothing serious." "Smart move," I called the waiter and ordered a bottle of tequila. "Don't rush into marriage." I rushed, and now I'm paying for it. Bitterness crept into my voice that I couldn't hide. I downed the tequila in one gulp, wincing. "You know what's worse than betrayal?" I looked straight into his eyes. "The daily, methodical humiliation from the person you entrusted with your life." I fell silent, looking at the ocean. The sun was slowly setting, coloring the water blood-red. Thomas remained silent, waiting. A good skill, knowing when to wait for the other person to continue on their own. "Want to talk about it?" He pushed a lime wedge toward me. "Maybe this will serve as a lesson to you." I poured another shot. "I'll tell you how love can turn into a poison that slowly kills your soul, and how one meeting in Cancun 2 years ago destroyed everything I had built." He leaned back in his chair. Something told me he would listen, not out of politeness but because he felt it was important. His father's son. 2 years ago, my wife Sarah and I came here to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary. I rolled the glass between my palms. That's quite a milestone. I wanted to do something special for her. Return to our youth. We often visited Mexico, went scuba diving, had fun. She always loved diving. The tequila burned my throat, but I barely tasted it. 30 years, I repeated. Do you know how many couples make it to their pearl anniversary? Statistically, less than 20%. I wanted it to be something special. I took a sip, remembering that first evening in Cancun 2 years ago. The air was just as humid. The same stars, the same sea. You know what's most ironic? I continued, breaking the prolonged silence. It all started because of the shrapnel. Right here, I tapped my chest with my finger. A small piece of metal lodged near my heart after Fallujah. Thomas leaned forward. Tell me about that day, about my father. I lowered my gaze, as if I could see through my shirt to the old scar. It was hell, Thomas, pure hell. Operation in Fallujah, clearing a district of insurgents. Your father commanded our unit. We were supposed to clear a 3-story building, presumably the headquarters of a local cell. I closed my eyes, and the memories flooded me with renewed force. The heat was unbearable, sand grinding between teeth. We entered the building, started checking room by room. On the 3rd floor, Captain Sullivan was the first to enter a large room that looked like a conference hall. I was right behind him. I paused, remembering every second of that day. And then I saw that damn grenade. It flew in through the window, right above your father's position. There was no time to shout, to warn, only to act. My voice became mechanical, as if I were reading a report. 3 steps, a leap. I knocked the captain down. I had to save the commander, your father, then an explosion. I remember a flash of pain in my back. The metal tore through the body armor like paper. Your father dragged me to cover, called for support. I was bleeding but conscious. I saw him coordinating the evacuation. I swallowed the lump in my throat. When the chopper was already approaching, a sniper opened fire. 1 bullet, right in the neck above the body armor. Your father fell beside me. I tried to stop the bleeding, but I shook my head. His last words were about you and your mother. Take care of my family, Mike. Honor above all. I took a worn military dog tag from my pocket. He wanted you to have this. I should have given it to you earlier, but I handed the dog tag to Thomas. I couldn't fulfill his last request. I didn't protect your mother from grief. And 2 years ago, I couldn't even protect my own family. Thomas took the dog tag, clutching it so tightly that his knuckles turned white. My father never went back on his word, he said quietly, and neither will I. In the military hospital in Germany, the doctors said removing the shrapnel was impossible. It was too close to the heart. Live with it, Mr. Hartman, but no, it could shift at any moment, and then we won't be able to do anything. And it shifted, Thomas asked quietly. 2 weeks ago, I nodded. Dr. Eisenstein said I have a month left, maximum. During the next heart attack, the shrapnel will pierce the aorta, and I'll bleed out in minutes, but before that. I looked at the ocean. The sun had almost disappeared beyond the horizon. Before that, I want to tell you how a piece of Iraqi shrapnel led me to the most beautiful woman I've ever met, and how she turned my life into hell. Her name was Emily, I began, and even the name on my tongue now tasted bitter. She was a military nurse at the hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. The first time I saw her was when I woke up after surgery. She was changing the bandages on my back. I smiled at memories that were once happy. You know what she said when she saw my back? Someone must care for you deeply if you are willing to take so much metal for them. I watched the waves breaking against the shore, rhythmically, inevitably, like the pain that had become part of my life. She wasn't like other nurses. She didn't avert her eyes from the scars, wasn't afraid of my nightmares. When I screamed in my sleep, she sat beside me and held my hand until I came to my senses. I took a sip of tequila. A month and a half in the hospital, then rehabilitation, physical therapy, pain every day, nightmares every night. And all this time she was by my side. You see, she wasn't just doing her job. She saw a person where others saw only a broken body. And you fell in love, it wasn't a question. Like a schoolboy, I nodded. Asked for her phone number on the day of my discharge. She laughed and said she'd already written it in my patient chart. In case of complications, she joked. I put the glass on the table, examining the amber liquid at the bottom. We got married 6 months later. Simple ceremony. A few friends from the unit, her colleagues from the hospital. She insisted I wear my dress uniform despite the scars, said she was proud to marry a hero. I shook my head. The first years were happy, difficult but happy. I tried to return to active duty, retraining courses, physical tests. Gritted my teeth through the pain but passed all the tests. Emily supported me, said she understood it was part of who I was. For a second I fell silent, remembering that first heart attack. And then, during one of the training sessions, the shrapnel shifted for the first time. I collapsed on the obstacle course as if cut down. Couldn't breathe, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The doctors insisted on discharge. I looked Thomas straight in the eye. You know what's hardest for a soldier? Not bullets, not explosions. The realization that you can no longer serve, that your body has betrayed you. And how did Emily react? Then she was the perfect wife. This isn't the end, Mike, she would say. We'll manage together. I got a job as a military instructor, paid less but it was still service. Then work in a veterans organization, helping guys like me find themselves in civilian life. I finished my tequila and poured more. But the years went by and the pain didn't go away. On the contrary, it grew stronger. Pills, injections, physical therapy, nothing helped for long. I saw how Emily grew tired of it, of me, of my principles which she once considered valor but now called outdated. Principles don't become outdated, Thomas said quietly. That's exactly what I used to say, I nodded. But for Emily, I transformed from a hero into a burden. She blamed me for the fact that we couldn't have children. The shrapnel damaged not only my back, but also. I cut myself off, not wanting to go into details. She blamed me for the years I gave to service, for the fact that we hadn't saved enough money, for not building a big house, not traveling the world. I took a sip, feeling the bitterness rising to my throat. 2 years ago, I decided to fix everything. Gathered all our savings, booked this resort, the very one where we spent our honeymoon, gave her a pearl necklace. Let's go to Cancun, I said. Let's celebrate our pearl anniversary where we were once so happy. I looked at the glowing sunset, and the sky seemed like a wound oozing blood. She agreed, and for a moment I thought I saw the old spark flash in her eyes, that not everything was lost yet. I laughed bitterly. What a naive fool I was. It was our second day in Cancun, I continued after a pause. We were relaxing by the pool. Emily looked relaxed, almost happy. I thought maybe we really are starting over. I rubbed my face, as if trying to erase the memories. And then he approaches our lounge chairs. Tall, tanned, early 40s. White shirt casually unbuttoned at the chest, expensive watch, hair with some gray. Charismatic, self-assured. Jason Ryder, Thomas pronounced. At that moment he introduced himself as a businessman from California. I nodded. Immediately started complimenting Emily. How beautiful she looked, what impeccable taste she had. Ordered champagne, insisted we join him. I gripped the glass so hard my knuckles turned white. Emily literally blossomed under his attention. Laughing, flirting, I hadn't seen her so. Alive in years. At first I didn't make much of it. It's nice when your wife is considered attractive." I shook my head. By evening, he already knew everything about us, where we lived, what we did, how long we'd been married. And then, when Emily went to change for dinner, he leaned toward me and whispered those words. I looked Thomas straight in the eye. "Mr. Hartman," he said, "your wife is magnificent. Tonight I'm going to take her to bed and you're going to watch. I bet she'll agree." The memory struck me again and again. I downed the glass in one gulp. I decided it was some sick joke, or a test, that Emily would return and I'd tell her about it and she'd put him in his place. But things turned out differently, Thomas said quietly. Emily returned in a new dress, short, revealing, the kind I hadn't seen her wear in years. She sat next to him, not me. All evening she listened to his stories, laughed at his jokes, drank his champagne. I fell silent, remembering how I sat at that table like a ghost no one noticed. By dessert, she was already allowing him to touch her hand, her shoulder. He looked at me over her head, and in his eyes was mockery. He knew he was winning the bet. I felt my heart start to beat faster, heavier again. The shrapnel responded with a dull pain. I couldn't believe this was happening. 30 years of marriage, and suddenly some stranger in one evening. I shook my head. I tried to remind her that it was time to return to our room. Late, I had medication scheduled. Emily looked at me with such irritation. "Go ahead, Mike. I'll stay a little longer." Jason promised to show me his collection of stamps from Latin America. I smiled bitterly. Collection of stamps, the oldest pretense in the world, and she used it without the slightest shame. I looked at Thomas. I pretended to believe her, went back to the room, lay awake waiting. 1 hour, 2, 3. Her phone wasn't answering. At 4 in the morning, I couldn't stand it anymore, went looking for her throughout the hotel. "And did you find her?" asked Thomas. I nodded, my face becoming stone. "In his bungalow on the beach. It was lit up, curtains not drawn. They didn't even bother to hide. That night I just stood there on the beach." My voice became mechanical, as if I were reading a report, watching my life fall apart. The worst part was that she knew I was there. She looked out the window, saw me. I took a sip, not tasting anything. At 5 in the morning, I returned to the room, wondering, what now? Divorce? Scandal? Fly home alone? I was considering the options when I received a text message. I took out my phone, opened an old message, a short link to a video. I didn't need to show it to Thomas, but I couldn't help myself. "Look, she sent this, that same night." On the screen appeared the same video I had shown before. Emily on Jason's lap, looking straight into the camera. "Enjoying the show, darling. You like to watch, don't you? That's all you're good for now." I turned off the video, unable to watch further. I called her, demanded explanations, said I was coming over right now. And what did she say? "Come on over, darling. Jason doesn't mind, he likes an audience." I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug into my palm. I took a taxi and went there. I was beside myself with rage, ready to kill them both with my bare hands. And what happened? I didn't even reach the door of the bungalow. I was met by 3 men, sturdy guys with guns under their shirts. One showed me photos on his phone, my sister leaving a supermarket in Denver, her children in the schoolyard, their house. Addresses, schedules, routes. I took another sip of tequila. "Senor Hartman," one of them said, "the boss is waiting for you. But first, we need to understand the rules of the game." I looked at the motionless Thomas. That's when I learned who Jason Ryder really was. Not a businessman from California. One of the leaders of a Mexican cartel, with connections everywhere, in the hotel, in the police, in the government. A man who had the means to track my family and threaten them. You could have gone to the FBI, to the embassy. I was in a foreign country, Thomas, alone with a bad heart, and my wife. I shook my head. She wasn't a hostage, she had made her choice. Thomas was silent, pondering what he had heard. Those three led me to the bungalow. Jason and Emily were waiting, sprawled on the couch. They were both half-dressed, with glasses of champagne. I shrugged, as if trying to shake off the memories. "And here's our guest," Jason said. "Have a seat, Mr. Hartman, or you can just stand and watch, whatever you prefer." "God," whispered Thomas, "and Emily, She laughed," my voice broke. "Came up to me, stroked my cheek like a dog. 'No need to get so tense, dear. It's bad for your heart. You know what the doctors said.'" I stared at the ocean, not seeing it. They enjoyed my humiliation. It was a game, not just infidelity, deliberate, methodical destruction of everything I held sacred. I suddenly found myself gasping for breath. The pain in my chest intensified. I took a pill from my pocket, swallowed it with tequila. That evening was just the beginning. During those 2 weeks in Cancun, they turned my life into hell, made me attend their dinners, watch them dance, watch them kiss. If I refused, Jason reminded me about my family. I finished the tequila. Emily changed completely, as if she had shed a mask she had worn for 30 years. She blossomed, became more energetic, younger, and I became a shadow of a man. Chapter 2, Truth Behind the Facade. I looked Thomas straight in the eye. "This didn't last just one day. 2 weeks, Thomas. 2 weeks of systematic humiliation. Dinners for three where I was the odd one out. Dances where I stood by the wall. One evening, Jason ordered me to bring them champagne to the room. I remembered that moment with crystal clarity. And you know what's worst? I did it. Knocked, entered with a tray. They were in bed, didn't even bother to cover themselves. 'Put it on the table, dear,' Emily said. Her voice was so indifferent, as if I wasn't her husband but a servant, invisible. I fell silent, watching as Jason leaned toward Emily, whispered something in her ear. She laughed, genuinely carefree, in a way she hadn't laughed with me for many years. That's when I hated myself more than them, for weakness, for cowardice, for allowing all this to happen. After a week of such vacation, I began to act. I continued, not taking my eyes off the couple. While they were having fun, I used old connections, called, sent encrypted emails. You make friends after 20 years in the Marines, friends who work in interesting places. Thomas leaned closer. "You were checking on Jason Ryder." The first thing I discovered, his real name wasn't Jason Ryder, I nodded. It was a carefully crafted legend. Fake passport, fake biography, fake life. I took a sip of water. His real name is Javier Hernandez, born in Culiacan, Mexico, graduated from the Wharton School of Business, then returned to Mexico. Officially, a successful importer-exporter. Unofficially, one of the key figures in the Sinaloa cartel. The one that controls a third of the drug trafficking in the U.S., Thomas asked quietly. "Exactly," I nodded. But Jason wasn't a street dealer or a thug. He was a financier, the brains of the operation, a man who laundered millions of dollars through legitimate businesses, hotels, restaurants, casinos. Half of Cancun's luxury resorts were built on drug money laundered through his companies. I watched how elegantly he raised his champagne glass. Perfect manners, impeccable style. Jason wasn't just rich, he was influential. He had judges, politicians, police officers in his pocket. All of Cancun was his personal kingdom. He could do whatever he wanted, and no one would dare to stop him. I lowered my voice. At the hotel, I found hidden cameras in my room. They observed my every move. Not just in the living room, in the bedroom, in the bathroom. There was no privacy anywhere. "Why would he do that?" Thomas frowned. "Control," I answered simply. "Absolute control. He wanted to know what I was doing, who I was talking to, wanted to be sure I posed no threat." I looked at Jason, sitting at the far end of the bar, how he casually stroked Emily's arm like a pet. But cameras work both ways. If you know where they're installed, you can use them against those who are watching. I began to act as if I had resigned myself, stopped arguing with Emily, followed all of Jason's orders, played the role of a broken man. I allowed myself a slight smile. And meanwhile, I gathered information. Thomas looked at me with new respect. Never attack without studying your opponent, I quoted one of the Marine Corps rules. The more I learned about Jason, the clearer I understood the scale of his business. He laundered hundreds of millions of dollars annually, controlled supplies through the Caribbean Sea, had connections with terrorist groups in South America. I paused, looking intently at Thomas. And he was untouchable. 3 attempted arrests all failed. Witnesses disappeared, judges changed decisions, prosecutors suddenly lost key evidence. The system was set up to protect people like him. But if you had evidence, who could I give it to? I shrugged. The local police, half of whom received envelopes from him every month. The FBI, which had been trying to build a case for years and failed. I was alone in a foreign country, with a bad heart and a hostage instead of a wife. I shook my head. No, Thomas, sometimes the system doesn't work, and then a man must become the system himself. Justice, retribution. But you know what was truly frightening? I turned my gaze back to Emily, watching how my wife changed, day by day, hour by hour. Thomas remained silent, waiting for me to continue. At first, I thought she was intimidated, that she was acting under coercion out of fear. That would have been understandable, forgivable. I remembered watching her during those first days, looking for signs of fear, discomfort, hopping to see a signal in her eyes, help me, save me. But with each passing day, it became more obvious. She wasn't a victim. She was a volunteer. Moreover, she was flourishing before my eyes. I took a sip of water, feeling a metallic taste in my mouth. But it wasn't just about external changes. She became cruel. She enjoyed my humiliation. Every time Jason touched her in my presence, she looked at me, checking my reaction, reveling in my pain. How is that possible? Thomas asked quietly, after so many years together. I asked myself the same question, I nodded, and gradually began to understand. Emily had always been ambitious. At the hospital, she was the best nurse, always striving for promotion. In our marriage, she constantly wanted more, a better house, a more prestigious neighborhood, expensive trips. I thought we were building a life together, through joint efforts. But years went by, and my career advancement ended when the shrapnel moved closer to my heart. We couldn't afford the lifestyle she dreamed of, and somewhere deep inside, she began to blame me for it. I paused, choosing my words. She never admitted it directly, but I saw her look when we drove past luxurious houses, heard her tone when she talked about friends whose husbands had successful careers. Emily wanted everything at once, and I could only offer her a modest life on a veteran's pension. But that's not your fault, Thomas frowned. You were wounded saving my father's life. Didn't she understand that? She did, once, I smiled sadly. But years of caring for a wounded husband wear you down, Thomas. My pain became her prison, my principles her chains, and she increasingly longed for freedom. I felt the pain beginning to pulse in my chest again. The shrapnel was making itself known. You know what she said on the 5th day of our vacation? We were having breakfast at the hotel restaurant, just the two of us, a rare moment without Jason. I asked her, why? Why are you doing this to me? And she looked at me so, calmly. Because I can now, Mike. Because I deserve something better than the life of a nurse married to a veteran with shrapnel in his heart. I rubbed my chest, as if trying to soothe a phantom pain. At that moment, I realized that the woman I had loved for 30 years was gone. Maybe she had never been there. I had loved an illusion, a mirage. And the real Emily had always been in her place, waiting for her time. On the 10th day of our stay in Cancun, the inevitable happened. I continued after a pause. Stress, heat, constant humiliation. The shrapnel shifted. Thomas tensed. It happened right in front of them. I spoke evenly, as if describing a military operation rather than a personal tragedy. Emily insisted I attend a private party in Jason's suite. Cancun's elite society, big money, powerful people. I was to act as a personal assistant, bringing drinks, performing minor errands. I clenched my fist, remembering the burning humiliation of that evening. Jason introduced Emily as his fiancée. "Emily Ryder," he would say, and the guests would nod condescendingly. No one was bothered that her real husband was standing in the corner of the room with a tray of canapés. I took a deep breath, controlling my heartbeat. At some point, Jason ordered me to bring champagne from another room. I went, feeling the guests' eyes on me. Pity, contempt, indifference. I saw these emotions on their faces. I was nobody. My hand involuntarily rose to my heart, remembering the pain. When I returned with the champagne, Jason and Emily were dancing. She was pressed against him, laughing. He was whispering something in her ear, and suddenly they both looked at me and laughed, loudly, unhidden. I was a joke, a laughingstock. I swallowed, remembering the next moments. And then it happened. First, a burning in my chest. Then, as if someone had plunged a red-hot knife right into my heart and started twisting. I dropped the tray. Champagne spilled across the floor. The guests stepped back, angry that I had ruined their expensive shoes. I fell silent, seeing that moment with crystal clarity. I fell to my knees, couldn't breathe, black dots before my eyes. The music continued to play, but as if underwater. I looked up and saw Emily. She was looking at me, without any expression, as if I were a stranger on the street who had collapsed from a heart attack. Thomas leaned forward. She didn't even try to help, a nurse with years of experience. "No," I shook my head. She turned away, continued dancing. I heard her say something to Jason, and then they both started laughing. I took a sip of water. My hand trembled slightly. I lay on the floor dying while they continued to enjoy themselves. Music, champagne, laughter. The world revolved around them, and I was just an obstacle, an inconvenient stain on their perfect evening. I leaned closer to Thomas, lowering my voice. "You know what's strangest? At that moment, balancing on the edge of death, I suddenly felt clarity. As if a veil had fallen from my eyes, I saw everything as it truly was. I felt the pain beginning to build in my chest again. Took a deep breath. Control your pulse. Somehow I managed to get up. No one noticed, everyone was too busy having fun. I left the room, reached the elevator, then my room. I had nitroglycerin there. It helped stabilize my condition. "And then what?" Thomas asked quietly. I waited, I shrugged. Lay on the bed thinking this night might be my last. And you know what surprised me? I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid that I would die without knowing the truth. Thomas frowned. "What truth?" Emily returned around 3 in the morning. Drunk, happy. She didn't expect to see me conscious. Stumbled over my suitcase, cursed. I closed my eyes, remembering every word. "You're still alive?" she asked in a tone as if she were asking if the shampoo had run out. I said I saw how she continued dancing while I lay on the floor. She shrugged. "What was I supposed to do? Ruin everyone's evening because of your latest attack?" I was silent, letting the words hang in the air. And then she collapsed on the bed, not even undressing, and mumbled a phrase that changed everything. "If you would just die, we would get the insurance." Thomas looked at me with wide eyes. "She really said that?" "God knows I wish I hadn't heard it," I nodded. But the words had already been spoken, and they couldn't be taken back. I looked at Emily at the other end of the bar, elegant, radiant, carefree. That night I understood completely. The woman I had loved for 30 years hadn't just changed. She was waiting for my death, dreaming of it. The next day I went to a clinic, I continued, not taking my eyes off the couple at the distant table. A local cardiologist confirmed what I already knew. The shrapnel had shifted by 2 millimeters. During the next attack, it would pierce the aorta. I had a month to live, maybe less. I smiled without any joy. Strange thing, when you know you're going to die soon, priorities change. Fear disappears. Only clarity of thought and purpose remain. I lowered my voice, although Emily and Jason sat too far away to hear. I returned to the hotel with a new attitude. No longer resisted, showed no emotions, became a shadow, invisible, unnoticeable. It worked. Jason and Emily relaxed, stopped fearing me. I became like furniture, part of the interior. I paused, choosing my words. One evening, they sent me to the bar for a special bottle of tequila. I deliberately delayed, knowing they would be too busy with each other to notice. When I returned, the door to the office was ajar. I felt anger rising within me again, cold, calculated. They were sitting at the table. Documents, maps, photographs lay before them. Emily was explaining something, pointing to a diagram of some building. Jason listened attentively, taking notes. I met Thomas's gaze. At first, I didn't understand what was happening, thought maybe it was related to his legitimate business. But then I heard phrases, names of military bases, coordinates of warehouses, routes of convoys. Thomas paled. She was passing information to the cartel. I nodded, feeling bitterness rising to my throat. Emily worked in a veterans organization, had access to data on military equipment supplies, on personnel movements. Not top-secret information, but valuable to those who know how to use it. I took out my phone, quickly scrolled to the necessary video, turned the screen to Thomas. In the recording, Emily handed Jason a folder with documents. She spoke quietly but clearly. Coordinates of the warehouse in El Paso. Guards change at midnight. 15-minute window between shifts. I turned off the video before Thomas could see how Jason thanked Emily, with a long kiss. A week after this conversation, the warehouse was attacked. 3 guards died. Weapons worth $2 million were stolen. Thomas looked at me, not hiding his horror. God, she committed treason. Exactly, I nodded. And I became an accomplice too because I remained silent, because I allowed it to continue. I clenched my fist. But at that moment I began to understand. This wasn't just personal betrayal. Emily had crossed a line. She had become a threat to national security, and Jason was using her as a tool. I looked at them, so elegant, so civilized. I started recording their conversations, photographing documents, gathering evidence, not just for myself, for the authorities, for justice. But why didn't you go to the FBI right away? Asked Thomas. In Cancun, I laughed bitterly, where every second police officer is on the cartel's payroll, where Jason could make any evidence disappear with one phone call. No, I had to act carefully, collect irrefutable evidence, create a package of proof that would be impossible to ignore or destroy. I felt pain in my chest again, a reminder that time was running out. The 2 weeks in Cancun ended, I continued after a pause. We returned home, to our little house in the suburbs with a white fence and a rose garden that Emily once loved so much. I looked past Thomas into the past. You know what's strangest? She acted as if nothing had happened. Cooked dinner, asked how I was feeling, reminded me to take my medicine. The perfect wife on the surface. I shook my head. But it was just an appearance, a facade, a mask she put on when she was with me. At night she texted Jason, planned meetings, passed information. I spoke quietly, but each word was filled with bitterness. I installed hidden cameras in our house. Not out of jealousy, I already knew about her infidelity, for evidence, and I saw her true self. When she thought she was alone, her face changed. The care, the tenderness disappeared. Only cold calculation remained. Thomas frowned. And Jason, did he come to the States? Every month, I nodded. Business trips, as he called them. Emily would take days off. They would meet at a hotel downtown. She would return home and get into our bed as if nothing special had happened. I clenched my fist. But that wasn't the worst part. One afternoon, I returned home earlier than usual. Emily was in the office talking on the phone. I heard a name, Raymond Foster, a divorce attorney known for his aggressive tactics. I paused, remembering every word of that conversation. Yes, Mr. Foster, he is terminally ill. Doctors give him a year or two at most. No chance of improvement. I want to be sure I get everything, the house, savings, insurance. He's inadequate, unable to make financial decisions. What? No children, so no complications. I looked at Thomas. 30 years together, Thomas. For 30 years I loved this woman, cared for her, shared my life with her. And she was coldly planning to take everything I had earned with my sweat and blood, preparing to accuse me of incompetence to gain control of my finances even before my death. I felt anger rising within me, not hot, wild, but cold, calculated. That day I made a decision. Emily must answer for her betrayal, not just to me, to the law, to the country she betrayed. Jason must be stopped, his cartel destroyed, and I must restore my honor before the shrapnel completes its work. I developed a plan, thorough, detailed, created irrefutable evidence. I turned to Thomas. 2 weeks ago I visited Dr. Eisenstein. He confirmed what I already felt. The shrapnel is moving. The next attack will likely be the last. A month of life maximum. I allowed myself a small smile. You know what's surprising? I felt relief. For the first time in 2 years, I had crystal clarity of purpose. I knew what I had to do before the shrapnel completed its work. I lowered my voice. I didn't tell Emily about the diagnosis. Let her think she has time, that she can carry out her plan. I gathered the necessary things, documents, evidence, and flew here to Cancun, the place where it all began 2 years ago. Why? Thomas asked quietly. To finish what was started, I simply answered. To restore justice, to regain my honor. They don't know I'm here, I said quietly. Not yet, but soon they will, and then. At that moment my phone vibrated. I looked at the screen, a message from Emily. Short, alarmed. Michael, where are you? I saw that you took things from the house. What's going on? I showed the message to Thomas. The game begins, son. Now I need your help. Chapter 3. My hotel room was standard, unremarkable. I was glad neither Emily nor Jason would look for me here. They would expect a former Marine to rent a room with enhanced security, possibly in another part of town. But the best way to hide is to dissolve into the crowd, to be ordinary, unremarkable. I closed the blinds, turned on the desk lamp, creating an island of subdued light. Thomas sat in the only armchair while I perched on the edge of the bed. Fatigue was weighing heavily. The flight and emotional strain were taking their toll, but there would be no rest. Not now. 2 weeks ago I received the final diagnosis, I began, unbuttoning the top buttons of my shirt. Remember I mentioned Dr. Eisenstein? Thomas nodded. The best cardiologist in the state, worked as a field surgeon in Afghanistan. If anyone could help me, it was him. I took a folded piece of paper from my pocket, the medical report, unfolded it, handed it to Thomas. He quickly scanned the text, pausing at the final paragraph. With the next displacement of shrapnel, the probability of aortic perforation is 94%. Palliative therapy is recommended. The projected life expectancy is from 4 to 6 weeks, he read aloud. Michael, perhaps you should consult with other specialists. Medicine doesn't stand still, maybe. I already consulted, I shook my head. 3 of the best cardiac surgeons in the country. Unanimous verdict: surgery is impossible. Too high a risk. 99% probability of a fatal outcome. I took back the report, carefully folded it and put it in my pocket. Do you know what it's like to live with shrapnel in your heart, Thomas? Each heartbeat reminds you that you're living on borrowed time. Each interrupted breath makes you wonder, is this the end? For 15 years, I've balanced on a knife's edge, hopping to live a full life before time runs out. I stood up, went to the window, slightly moved the blinds. Below, the hotel lights shone. Laughter of vacationers by the pool could be heard. I was told I should take care of myself. No strain, no stress, no strong emotions. A measured, calm life. And I accepted these limitations. For Emily, I smiled bitterly. I believed our love was worth such sacrifices. I let go of the blinds, turned to Thomas. When you're given a limit, it makes you reevaluate priorities. What was I afraid of all these years? Death? No. I was afraid of not having enough time. Not seeing children grow up, children we never had. Not growing old with a woman who, as it turned out, was eagerly awaiting my death. Not leaving something meaningful behind. I began packing the room, an old habit that helped me think. After visiting Eisenstein, I spent a sleepless night. Lay listening to Emily's breathing and thought, what really matters? What do I want to achieve in the few days I have left? I stopped, looked directly at Thomas. And the answer came with crystal clarity. I want to restore justice. I want traitors to answer for their crimes. I want to leave with dignity, on my own terms, not writhing in pain on a hospital bed while my wife counts the hours until the insurance payout. Thomas was silent, and I could see emotions succeeding each other in his eyes. Compassion, confusion, understanding. Michael, he finally said, are you talking about revenge or justice? Can one exist without the other? I shrugged. Revenge without justice is just animal cruelty. Justice without retribution is an empty sound. I want them to answer before the law. I want the world to know who they really are. I approached my suitcase, opened it. Under neatly folded clothes lay a military box made of polished steel, small but sturdy. I extracted it, placed it on the bed. I've made my decision, Thomas. Either die as a coward, watching my life being destroyed, or leave in my own way, preserving my honor. Your father chose the latter, so do I. I opened the metal box. Inside lay my treasures, not gold or jewels, but items carrying priceless memories. Military dog tags, mine and James Bradley's. A photo of our unit in Fallujah, worn around the edges from countless touches. Letters from families of saved soldiers, simple words of gratitude handwritten. And a gun, a Colt M1911A1 classic military model, heavy, reliable, tested by time. This was my father's pistol. I lifted the weapon, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. He carried it through Vietnam, and before that, my grandfather wore it on the beaches of Normandy. I carefully placed the pistol on the bed. My father gave it to me before my first deployment to Iraq, said, "Son, I hope you never have to use it, but if you do, don't forget that each shot is a choice between honor and dishonor." I looked at the pistol, feeling its silent presence. An old soldier, ready for one last mission. I didn't take it to Iraq, kept it at home in a safe. A talisman, a reminder of duty and honor. The only time I seriously considered using it, 2 years ago in Cancun when I first saw Emily with Jason. But back then, I lacked the courage. I raised my eyes to Thomas. Now I know what I have to do. Tonight it all ends. But I need your help, Thomas. He straightened in his chair. What do you want from me? Not participation in murder if that's what you're worried about. I allowed myself a slight smile. You're too much like your father to go for that. I need you to be a witness, the eyes and ears of justice. I took a flash drive from the box. Here's all the evidence, video recordings of their meetings, documents Emily passed to the cartel, bank statements confirming transfers. Enough to put them both behind bars for a long time. But there's a problem. What problem? Asked Thomas. Jason is too influential. One word from him and the evidence disappears. Witnesses recant their testimony. Judges recuse themselves due to health issues. We need something more convincing. I leaned closer. Tonight they'll meet on the beach, where it all began 2 years ago. They have an anniversary. I spat out the last word like something bitter. A little celebration of the beginning of their relationship. 2 years since they destroyed my life. How do you know? I have my sources, I smirked. Money can buy not only loyalty but also betrayal. One of Jason's men was also dishonored by him. He informed me of their plans and schedule. I leaned back against the headboard. I need you to record everything that happens. Stay in the shadows, don't intervene. Just recording clean, clear, unedited. Evidence that cannot be ignored. I looked at him firmly. And when it's all over, you'll send the materials to a list of addresses I'll give you. FBI, military counterintelligence, major media outlets. Simultaneously, so no one can suppress the case. Thomas was silent, considering. I could see the struggle in his eyes. I understand what you're thinking, I said quietly. That this is wrong, that there are other ways, legal paths. Aren't there? He asked. For people like Jason, I shook my head. He doesn't play by the rules. For him, law is a tool, not a limitation. He bought half of Cancun, has connections in Washington. What can the system do against someone like him? I sighed. And Emily, she would wriggle out, would play the role of a frightened wife who was coerced, would find a way to come out dry. She was always a master of manipulation. I picked up the pistol, checked the magazine. But I'm not going to kill them if that's what concerns you. I want justice, not blood. Then what exactly are you planning? Thomas looked at me with obvious distrust. To make them confess, on camera, publicly, all the details of their deal with the cartel, treason, plans for my murder, and then, I paused, then I'll decide my fate myself. I met his gaze. I need your help, Thomas, not for me, for justice, for truth, for the memory of your father. He was silent for a long time, studying my face, as if looking for answers to unspoken questions. Finally, he slowly nodded. I'll help you, Michael, but only with the recording. No violence, no killings. I promise you, I extended my hand. All I want is the truth, the rest is up to them. We sealed the deal with a handshake, and I felt some of the weight slide from my shoulders. James Bradley's son, as honest and straightforward as his father, a worthy heir. I laid out a homemade map of the beach on the bed, an amateur sketch, but accurate enough for our purposes. A red circle marked an isolated cove between the rocks, the very place where Jason and Emily had arranged to meet. They'll be there at midnight, I pointed to the mark. A secluded spot hidden from prying eyes. That's where Jason first brought Emily 2 years ago. Thomas studied the map carefully. How will we get there? There are 2 roads, I traced my finger along the lines. The main path which they use, and a second along the rocks, more difficult but invisible from the main beach. We'll take that one. I marked another point on the map, a small outcrop among the rocks. You'll be here, the perfect position for filming, good view but you won't be noticed. Stay in the shadows, don't make noise, don't use flash. I took a small digital camera from my bag. Military model, infrared filming, image stabilization, directional microphone. Will catch every word even with the sound of the surf. Thomas took the camera, turned it in his hands. You're well prepared. I had 2 years to think through every detail, I nodded. Every step, every word, I know how they'll react. I know their weaknesses. I marked another position on the map, the place where I plan to appear. I'll come out from here. They won't be expecting guests, especially from this side. The element of surprise is on my side. Thomas frowned. What if they're armed? They will be, I nodded. Jason always carries a gun on his ankle, a compact Glock 43, 6 rounds in the magazine. Emily may be armed too. In recent months, she's been carrying a small Ruger LCP in her purse. I allowed myself a bitter smile. Funny, isn't it? She always hated weapons, said guns were instruments of death that have no place in a civilized society, but for Jason, she made an exception. This is dangerous, Thomas shook his head, if they start shooting. They won't, I said confidently. At least not right away. Jason is too self-assured. He'll believe he can control the situation with words. And Emily. I hesitated for a moment. She won't shoot me. Too much shared history. Thomas didn't look convinced but remained silent. When I appear, I'll start a conversation, I continued. Push their vulnerable spots, make them talk, confess. All of this needs to be on camera, every word, every reaction. I looked at the pistol. If all goes according to plan, they'll back themselves into a corner. They'll confess to all their crimes themselves. And if not, Thomas asked quietly. I was silent, choosing my words. Then I'll present them with a choice, confession or consequences. What consequences? All the evidence I've gathered over 2 years. I nodded toward the flash drive. Enough to destroy them. Not as quickly and not as publicly as I would like, but no less effectively. Thomas looked at me intently. And what then, after they confess? I met his gaze. Then I'll complete my mission. They'll be arrested, brought to trial, convicted, and I'll leave on my own terms. You mean, Thomas began. That's my decision, I interrupted. Mine and mine alone. I'm not asking you to approve it or participate, just to witness the truth. Silence fell. We both understood where this was heading but didn't put it into words. The next hour we spent in preparation. I wrote a farewell video message explaining my actions and motives, recorded it on the same camera that Thomas would use. Short, concise, without emotions, just facts, names, dates. Everything the authorities needed to know to continue the investigation. If you're watching this, I addressed an invisible viewer, it means I'm already dead, but my death will not be in vain. I spoke directly, clearly, as if making a report to command. Told about Jason, his connections with the cartel, money laundering operations. About Emily's role in passing classified information. About attacks on military facilities that became possible thanks to her betrayal. Thomas silently observed me, not interrupting. When I finished recording, he only asked, "Are you sure you want to go all the way?" "More than sure," I nodded, turning off the camera. "It's the only way to guarantee that the truth comes out." Then I prepared 2 envelopes. The first contained an official statement to the FBI, a detailed report on Jason's operations, with names, dates, accounts, copies of documents passed by Emily, photos of meetings with known drug lords, enough information to start a federal investigation that would be impossible to stop. The second envelope was for Emily. In it, I collected evidence of her betrayal, not only of me but of the country we both swore to serve. Photographs, letters, recordings of phone conversations, and a short note from me. "You sold your soul and my heart for an illusion of luxury. I hope it was worth it." I handed both envelopes to Thomas. "After everything is finished, you'll deliver the first envelope to the authorities and the second to Emily, personally into her hands." He hesitantly took the envelopes. "You're the only one I can trust with this. The son of James Bradley, a man with the same unyielding sense of justice." Thomas accepted the flash drive, clutching it in his palm. "You understand that you're asking a lot, to be an accomplice." "Not an accomplice," I interrupted. "A witness, a keeper of truth, one who won't allow history to be rewritten to suit the powerful." I looked him straight in the eye. "All right," Thomas finally said. "I'll do it for the truth." "Thank you," I simply replied. I took the mirror off the wall, placed it on the bed, extracted a small shaving kit from the box, unpacked the razor. "What are you doing?" asked Thomas. "Getting ready." I met his gaze in the mirror. "You know what they say in the Marine Corps. Look good, even when you feel bad. I'm not going to meet my fate unshaven." I applied foam to my face, began methodically shaving off the 3-day stubble. Confident, precise movements without hurry or rush. As always. "You're strangely calm," Thomas noted. "Because I finally know what to do," I continued shaving. "For the first time in 2 years I have clarity, purpose, understanding of why I'm still here." Finished with shaving, I took out a clean shirt, white, crisp with starch. The same kind I wore on important days of service. "Last parade," I said quietly, buttoning the buttons. "Need to look appropriate." We left the hotel at 11:30, taking a taxi to the nearest point on the coast. From there, we continued on foot, a narrow path along the rocks, barely visible in the light of the almost full moon. The ocean roared to our right, breaking against the rocks, creating perfect acoustic cover. I moved confidently, despite the darkness. Every turn of the path, every descent and ascent had been memorized during the long months I had planned this night. Thomas followed me silently, focused, occasionally checking the camera in his backpack. At 11:50, we reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a small bay. The perfect observation position, hidden in shadow but with a good view of the sandy beach below. I gestured to Thomas to take his place, then took out a small pair of binoculars. They were already there. Jason had spread a blanket on the sand, set up a small folding table, a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket, 2 glasses, candles creating an intimate circle of light. The perfect romantic evening. Emily sat beside him, but her posture betrayed tension, shoulders raised, back straight, eyes constantly scanning the perimeter. "They're nervous," I whispered, passing the binoculars to Thomas. "Especially her. She knows I'm somewhere nearby." Thomas looked through the binoculars, then returned them to me. "Jason has a gun," he said quietly, "in his ankle just as you said." "And another one under the blanket," I nodded. "He doesn't trust compact models for serious matters." I observed them for a few more minutes. Jason filled the champagne glasses, made a toast. They drank, but without the usual enthusiasm, more mechanically, like part of a ritual that needed to be performed. "It's time," I turned to Thomas. "Remember, stay in the shadows, don't intervene no matter what happens. Record everything." I extended my hand to him. "If something goes wrong, tell Eisenstein he was right. The shrapnel eventually found its target." Thomas firmly shook my hand. "Good luck, Michael." I nodded, then began descending the narrow path that circled the rock. The plan was simple: emerge from the eastern side of the bay, where they least expected to see guests. Use the element of surprise to gain a psychological advantage. Moonlight reflected off the water, creating an intricate play of shadows on the sand. The sound of the surf muffled my steps. I moved slowly, methodically, as if on a combat mission. Breathing even, pulse controlled, mind clear. As I approached, I could hear fragments of their conversation. "No need to panic," Jason was saying. "He's an old man with a bad heart. What can he do?" "You don't know him." Emily's voice sounded tense. "Michael isn't one to throw words to the wind. If he said he'd be here." "Then we'll be ready," Jason laughed, but there was no joy in his laughter. "A surprise for your husband." I stopped behind a large rock, the last cover before the open space of the beach. Checked the pistol, made sure it was easily accessible. Took a deep breath, exhaled. "This is your last fight, old soldier," I thought. "Make it worthy." And I stepped into the light. "Good evening," I said calmly, loudly. "I hope I'm not late for the celebration." They both jumped up, Jason instantly with the grace of a predator, his hand already reaching for his ankle. Emily more slowly, her face pale in the moonlight. "Michael," she exhaled. "How nice of you to join us, Mr. Hartman." Jason quickly regained his composure, smiled his trademark shark smile. "Champagne. We're just celebrating. A special date." "I know." I took another step forward. 2 years since you destroyed my life. An impressive anniversary." I stopped a few meters from them, at the very edge of the circle of light created by the candles. The perfect distance, close enough for conversation, far enough for maneuver. "Stand up," I quietly ordered, "both of you." Jason laughed, spreading his arms in a theatrical gesture. "Look who decided to give orders. Our little veilleur has suddenly become so brave." "Darling, your timing is impeccable," Emily smiled nervously. "We were just about to start." "Stand up," I repeated, taking out the pistol. "Now." The smile disappeared from Jason's face. They slowly rose, looking at the weapon in my hand. "Let's not do anything foolish, Michael." Emily raised her hands in a conciliatory gesture. "We can talk like civilized people. Everything can be resolved." "Oh, we'll definitely talk." I took another step forward. "We'll have a very, very interesting conversation." I looked into their eyes, trapped, cornered, beginning to understand that this evening would not go according to their script. The conversation starts now. Chapter 4, The Price of Honor. The pistol in my hand was heavy, not just because of the weight of the metal, but because of the history it carried. 3 generations of Hartmans had held it in the face of death. Today it was my turn. The sound of waves drowned out everything except our voices. The black sky, studded with stars, indifferently observed 3 dots on the sand, 3 lives intertwined by betrayal, pain, and retribution. Thomas's camera silently recorded from the shadow of the rocks, a witness that doesn't lie. "Michael, put down the gun." Emily's voice trembled, but other notes were audible in it. "Calculation, the habit of manipulation. This isn't the solution. We can discuss everything." Jason slowly straightened up, demonstratively raising his hands. His movements were smooth, measured, like those of a predator assessing its prey. "Listen to her, amigo." He smiled his trademark shark smile. "Let's talk like civilized people. Have a drink." He nodded at the champagne. "Discuss what can be done." "What can be done?" I didn't lower the pistol. 2 years. 2 years of methodical humiliation. For 2 years I watched my life fall apart, my country betrayed, the memory of my service tarnished. And you want to discuss? I stepped forward, entering the circle of light from the candles. Now my face was as clearly visible to them as theirs was to me. "Fine, let's discuss." My voice was calm, controlled. "Let's start with you, Jason. Or should I call you Javier Hernandez? Shall I tell you that you're not really a businessman from California, but one of the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel?" Jason tensed, the smile disappeared. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Hartman. This is some kind of misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I laughed bitterly. "Like the 3 guards who died at the warehouse in El Paso after my wife gave you the security diagrams. Also a misunderstanding." Emily paled, stepped back. "Michael, you're delirious. It's your heart, the medications." "Don't you dare," I interrupted her, feeling anger beginning to break through the carefully constructed wall of control. "Don't you dare use my illness as an excuse. I saw everything, recorded everything. I have evidence of every crime you've committed." I looked at my watch, exactly midnight. Fair, time itself had come for the debtors. "And what's next?" asked Jason, maintaining external calm, but I could see his hand imperceptibly moving toward his ankle. "You came to kill us. Don't you realize you won't get out of here alive?" "I wasn't planning to get out," I answered honestly. "Doctors gave me a month to live, maximum. During the next attack, the shrapnel will pierce my aorta, so I'm not afraid of death, Jason. I'm afraid of dying without restoring justice." Emily took a step toward me, her eyes full of tears. Acting had always come easily to her. "Darling, why didn't you tell me? I could have. We could have found better specialists." "You would have accelerated your plans," I replied coldly. "Rushed the divorce, the accusations of incompetence, the appropriation of everything I earned." She froze, the mask of sympathy slipped for a moment, revealing her true face, calculating, cold. "I don't know what you're." Mr. Foster, the divorce attorney. I didn't take my eyes off her. Yes, Mr. Foster, he is terminally ill. Doctors give him a year or two at most. No chance of improvement. I want to be sure I get everything. The house, savings, insurance. Emily stepped back as if struck. You were eavesdropping on me. And you were betraying your country, I countered. Which is worse, what do you think? Jason laughed, but there was no joy in his laughter. Excellent show, Mr. Hartman, but your accusations are groundless. You have no proof, just the words of a dying, offended husband. There is proof, I nodded toward the rocks where Thomas was hiding. Right now, everything is being recorded, and not just this. I have recordings of all your meetings for the past 2 years, documents that Emily passed, bank accounts, names, dates, everything. I paused, watching as Jason's self-confidence gave way to concern. By the way, how is your partner Miguel Rojas, still hiding in Colombia after that failed delivery? This was a test. I knew that Miguel Rojas was indeed Jason's partner and was indeed hiding in Colombia after a botched operation. Information from reliable sources. And by the way Jason flinched, I knew I had hit the mark. You have nothing. Jason tried to regain control, but his voice no longer sounded so confident. You're bluffing. Really? I smiled. Then why haven't you pulled the gun from your ankle yet? Glock 43, 6 rounds, safety on the right. Not the most convenient weapon, but compact. His face visibly tensed. I continued. And don't think about the one hidden under the blanket. Beretta 92, 15 rounds. Good gun, but takes too long to reach. I'll shoot first. I could see the struggle within him. Predator instinct versus rational business mind. What do you want? He finally asked. Money, name the amount. I don't need your dirty money, I shook my head. I want the truth. A confession on camera about everything, the cartel, operations, information that Emily passed, everything. He measured me with a look, then suddenly laughed. And you think I'll just confess, like that at gunpoint? Exactly, I nodded. Or you'll go down. All the evidence I've collected will be sent to the FBI, DEA, every major news agency. Names of your business partners, political patrons, corrupt judges. Even if you kill me, the information will still be released. The mechanism has already been set in motion. I could see him calculating options. Jason was smart, calculating. He had built an entire empire on the ability to assess risks. So I have no choice, he said slowly. There's always a choice, I replied. Just some options are better than others. Jason looked at Emily, then back at me. Then he jerked sharply, his hand darting to his ankle. I fired without hesitation. Technique, perfected by years of training, 2 bullets, center mass. He fell, clutching his chest. Emily screamed, trying to crawl away from Jason's body. No, Michael, please. Her hands trembled, makeup smeared from tears. I turned the pistol toward her. Don't move, sit down. Now it's your turn, Emily. I looked at the woman I had once loved more than life. Answer the main question. Why? What did I do to deserve this betrayal? She sat on the sand, trembling all over. Jason's dark blood was slowly soaking into the sand beside her. I don't know, her voice was barely audible. He seemed so, powerful, confident. With him I felt young, desired. And me? I asked quietly. Did 30 years of marriage mean nothing? They did, I swear they did. She crawled to me on her knees. I was foolish, I got lost. Michael, darling, give me a chance to fix everything. I looked at her, trying to find even a glimmer of sincerity in her eyes, but I saw only fear. Not for me, for herself. Fix, I shook my head. Remember what you said when I had a heart attack at that party. If he dies, we'll get the insurance. Emily froze. Something changed in her gaze. The mask fell completely. Before me sat the real Emily, the one I had never truly known. What choice did I have? Her voice suddenly hardened. You're a complete failure. Your whole life you've been retelling your war stories. She stood, brushing sand from her knees. The fear had disappeared, giving way to bitterness and malice that had apparently been accumulating for years. And what did I get? An empty house, no children, endless waiting, constant worry about your heart, about your attacks. I was a nurse at work and a nurse at home. You turned my life into an endless hospital ward. Go on, I coldly commanded, cocking the hammer. The whole truth. Yes, I loved him, she shouted, pointing at Jason's body. Loved how he humiliated you, put you in your place. You're nothing, a helpless impotent who silently watched us. A strange smile touched my lips, almost tender. Now I see the real you. Thank you for your honesty. I lowered the pistol but didn't put it away. The moon shone brightly, silvering the surface of the ocean. A perfect night for the final act of my life. You know what's ironic? I asked, looking not at Emily but at the stars. I loved you, truly. Until the end, I hoped you were acting under coercion, out of fear, that the woman I lived with for 30 years couldn't voluntarily betray everything we believed in. I turned my gaze to her. But I was wrong. There was always another Emily beside me, cold, calculating, waiting for the moment to stab me in the back. What now? She asked, and in her voice was neither remorse nor regret, only cold calculation. Now I'll finish what I started. I raised the pistol to my temple. No, Emily suddenly rushed toward me. Don't you dare, you can't just leave like that. Why not? I calmly asked. I'm dying, the shrapnel will kill me anyway. I won't let you, she screamed. You can't abandon me. Only now did I understand. It wasn't about love or care. She was afraid of losing control, afraid that I would leave on my own terms, depriving her of the last word, the last power over me. Goodbye, Emily. I pulled the trigger. The shot sounded deafening in the night silence. The pain was instantaneous, and then, nothing. Darkness embraced me. Thomas Bradley emerged from the shadow of the rocks, stopping beside Emily, who was petrified with shock. She stood motionless between the bodies of two men, staring into emptiness with glazed eyes. Who are you? She trembled, unable to focus her gaze. Someone who will tell everyone the truth. He handed her the envelope, simultaneously activating the upload of the video to the cloud. Check your email, Mrs. Hartman, and the news. Soon there will be a lot of interesting information about you and your lover. He turned to leave. Life imprisonment guaranteed. Police sirens were already sounding in the distance, approaching the beach. The video spread across the internet like an explosion, millions of views in the first day. Michael's materials were impeccable. Names, dates, accounts, recordings of meetings. The power of the cartel couldn't stop the wave of revelations. Federal agents burst into Emily's house at dawn, found a cache of documents and flash drives. At the trial, when the prosecutor played the recording of her words during Michael's heart attack, she broke down. Defendant Emily Hartman for treason, aiding a drug cartel, complicity in the death of federal employees, and disclosure of state secrets, is sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Thomas watched as they led her out of the courtroom. Once a proud woman had turned into a broken old woman in a gray prison jumpsuit. Sometimes he checked the federal prison website, a pale, emaciated face, dim eyes. She worked in the laundry, washing other inmates' uniforms. They said she was often heard crying in her cell at night. Michael was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Thomas stood at his grave, remembering their conversation in the restaurant. He had fulfilled his promise, told the story, handed over the evidence, achieved justice. The money left by Michael went to create a fund to support veterans, helping those who returned from war and were trying to find their place in civilian life. Thomas, inspired by the example of Michael and his father, graduated from the military academy, became a military prosecutor. He had a son, whom he named Michael. On Michael Hartman's simple headstone were engraved words, that became the motto of the fund and Thomas's life credo. He preserved his honor. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.